most of the time working in the border program. I've also worked in the water division. And I'd also like to ask my colleague Jessica, and then our two additional speakers, Jill and Lucy, if you could introduce yourselves as well.
Hi, this is Jessica Helgeson with the San Diego Border Office. I work with Emily on the border program. It's great to see everyone today.
Jill?
Hi, this is Jill Sherman Warren. I'm the Native American Environmental Protection Coalition Executive Director, and I've been working on border issues for many years. Many of you know me, have received emails from me, and I'm excited to be here and share with you.
Lucy?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Greetings from Phoenix. My name is Lucy Lee. I'm an entomologist at the University of Arizona. I have been studying insects for about 25 years, and I have lots of stories about them. And we'll share with you some today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next slide, please. This particular slide, covers the 4 topics that I'm going to be talking to you about today. I'm going to briefly revisit how the border is defined. We'll review the past border programs and timeline and the new Border 2025 program. We'll share ideas on how we can make the border program more relevant in response to tribal comments and allow time for review of ideas and dialogue. And you will be seeing this particular slide. Let's go to the next one. As we go into each of the 3 sections of the border program. So I'd like to begin with slide number 4, which is the border region. We want to acknowledge that the border region and the transboundary concerns can seem arbitrary and not so relevant to some tribes. The border region was defined in 1983 as part of the La Paz Agreement between EPA and Severanat. The border region covers 2,000 miles from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean, and it extends 62 miles north and south of the Mexico border. The border region is made up of 2 countries, 10 border states, 15 sister cities, and 26 federally recognized tribes. The region was originally defined by the cultural and economic connection of the people living in the border region. The next map includes the 26 federally recognized tribes, a little closer look at that. And we can see through this map how different the border region can be perceived based on the tribe's proximity or not to the border region. So I want to address that. The next slide, we can also see from this map of ecoregions that the environment is naturally transboundary. And if you pick out the border region, you'll notice there are 4 types of regions from left to right that are shared. The light green, yellow, brown, and beige. And these represent different ecoregions. In California, we're in the Mediterranean region. In Arizona, we're in more of an arid region. And this shows how wildlife corridors and plants naturally share this transboundary space. The next map that I'd like to share is a map that shows a transboundary connection in terms of watersheds and rivers. The airsheds also have an axis that match the geography somewhat. The transboundary impacts from water pollution and land-based sources of trash are important to us in this program. However, we also want to emphasize the broader definition of the region based on economic, cultural, and geography factors. The shared climate conditions and how these factors inform the border program needs. So I'd like to transition now to the border programs that we've had. In this slide number 9, we have a timeline of the past successive border environmental programs, beginning with the La Paz Agreement, which was signed in 1985. And this program was focused on the movement of hazardous materials and waste across our ports of entry. And eventually successive programs expanded to include other topics. And we've had 4 programs since then. We had the Integrated Border Environmental Plan, which began in 1992 to 94. We moved then to Border 21, 1995 to 2000, and this established 9 border work groups to address transboundary environmental concerns. Then we had Border 2012, which was a 10-year program with a bottom-up approach. And for the first time, they had a tribal signatory. It also introduced the concept of task forces. And then the more recent program is Border 21, which is an 8-year program, and it introduced the use of binational action plans as a tracking and reporting tool on program accomplishments. So I'd like to move then to the next slide, which is on the development of Border 2025. The planning for this program began in 2019, and the planning was formalized in November of 2019 with a meeting with SEMARNAT, the Mexican Federal Environmental Agency, and EPA. This is when both countries agreed to develop a new program by September 2020. The program has been delayed, and I'll touch on that in a moment. In March, we started the outreach and engaged in a two-phase consultation process with the tribes. And in the summer, we released a draft Border 2025 framework. Our headquarters office also sent letters to tribal chairpersons and border states asking for input. And during this time, we had extensive outreach through workshops and webinars. And we had 2 sets of workshops and webinars specifically for tribes. I want to note that we had a very high participation rate in these workshops that were held for tribes, even during COVID-19. So I want to thank you all for that. We will keep you informed once we have more information about the new program. I understand that yesterday, the tribes were sent an email providing a formal communication with regard to the delay of Border 2025, and we will continue to give you updates as we have them. So moving on to the next slide, I'd like to share with you the kinds of highlights of the comments that we've received from the tribes. Basically, we learned that the tribes were less engaged over the last few years, especially during the last program. In part, it was a challenge for tribes to compete with the transboundary solicitation criteria that has been characteristic of our solicitation, especially under the current border program, Border 2020. Also, the border program can seem less relevant to some tribes, especially considering the different distances amongst the tribes in the border. You have those that are directly on the border, like Tohono O'odham and Campo, and then you have tribes like Torres Martinez and Pachanga that are right at the border of Riverside County. So we're experiencing the border very differently depending on how close you are to that. I'd like to move on then to quickly review the Border 2025 framework and goals. The last draft of the program had a shorter timeline of 5 years instead of 8 years, and it had 1 less goals. The goals that include improve water quality, reduce air pollution, promote sustainable materials and waste management and clean sites, and improve joint emergency preparedness. In the next slide, we have the proposed organizational structure. I'm showing you the last structure that was in the last draft that was shared with the public and with you. And as you can see, the program structure is very similar to the most recent program. The EPA and SEMARNAT are the national coordinators, includes the policy fora. We have a formal communication task forces. We have regional coordinators. And this is the new proposal that was to add tribal representative as part of each of those regions. And then we continue to have the task forces. Moving on, I'd like to transition to ideas that we would like to share with you today on how we can strengthen the border program. So basically, we have 4 ideas to strengthen the program. I will ask Jill to comment on these as soon as I review them with you. The first one is what I've just shared with you in the previous slide, which was to have tribal representative in each of the regions. We will need to get tribal input in terms of how this will work. Our agency also created a position of an EPA tribal program liaison, and I am currently serving in that role, and I hope that the role of this position will evolve as I gain knowledge and have dialogue with all of you. And also we'd like to propose, given the RTOC structure, that we consider creating a border tribal work group. And the idea would be that this work group could help inform the regions. Perhaps this work group could be in place for the first year, depending on how useful the work group, successful the work group is, relevant. the work group could stay in place through the duration of the program. So this is an idea that we're sharing with you. Finally, we want to improve the task forces we have. We want them to better serve you. I know we recently had a California Baja Waste and Enforcement Task Force, which I have been a co-chair now for several years. And we provide simultaneous translation. I know in our last meeting, the audio and the translation was not very good. And I want to thank all of you who gave me comments about that, because we definitely want to improve on that. So there's ideas in terms of potentially rotating the meetings so that they're more focused on tribal issues, for example. So I'd like to pause here for a moment to ask Jill if she could comment in terms of past experience in terms of tribal representation or any of these ideas. Jill?
Yes. So the idea of regional coordinators, as many of the tribes on the call here today know, in the past, we have typically had a tribal individual volunteer, usually a tribal leader volunteer, to do the presentation to the national coordinators meeting. We haven't had a national coordinators meeting in some time, so we haven't, requested for a volunteer to do that. But typically we have had Campos participated, Tahana Atsum's participated, we've had a variety of tribal leaders come forth, PAMA, to provide the presentation to the national coordinators meeting. And typically NAPEC has been the one to prepare the presentation along with the tribal leader. So we've had a quasi-regional, tribal regional representative, and I think that might be a good idea. But I also know that it could potentially be time-consuming for a tribal leader to participate at that level. So we would definitely want, probably along with the tribal leader as the tribal representative, an identified employee who would be the one that either I or somebody else would be working with. I think it's great that we have a defined tribal border program liaison, because we haven't really had this. We've worked with the office of the San Diego border office, and they've done a really good job, but I think it's really a good opportunity for us to have one specific individual who's going to be coordinating all the work along the US-Mexico border, and somebody that we can talk to as tribes to directly contact. I think that's a real plus. As for a border tribal work group, as you know, the tribal work groups typically come from the tribes themselves. So we would be looking for a tribal individual to put forth the idea of the tribal work group. I'm not sure if it just needs to come from EPA or not, but then that person would be responsible for setting up those work group meetings and having conversations. And NAPEC, of course, could support that. The other thing that has been ongoing, and we haven't seen a lot of meetings like we have in the past with border program task forces, but typically in the past, NAPEC has sometimes attended those meetings to try to disseminate information to tribes. And those meetings have kind of been far and few between over the past few years. But I anticipate that it potentially could be picking up more. And, NAPEC, of course, could continue to act as a conduit for information to be passed over to the tribes, and doing more of that one-on-one touch with tribes to get them to be interested in participating. As Emily had mentioned previously, it's been really, there's been a multitude of factors that have kind of prevented tribes being able to participate at the level that they have in the past. In the past, we had funding for travel, and that's where the work group would come in, is that maybe tribes who don't have access to travel funds could, with a work group, be identified to access our travel funds.
Okay, well, thank you, Jill, and we can address that again in this presentation. So I'd like to move then on to slide 16 on ideas for program improvement. I apologize if I've gone really quickly on some of the earlier material. Many of you know some of that, but I know some of you be new to that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I move too quickly on some of these past topics. So given the challenges that the tribes express with regard to competing with transboundary criteria, we would like to provide grant flexibility on the transboundary benefit, and I'm going to give some examples in terms of how we can do that. We also want to work with tribes again to identify challenges and needs and priorities in the border region. In a moment, I will ask Jill to comment again on some of the past work that NAPEC has done on assessments. And we also need to work with tribes to seek funding alternatives for any unmet needs that we identify as part of the work that we do with the tribes in terms of looking at needs and priorities in the border region. So I want to move to slide 17 on what are the challenges and needs based on the geographic region and the tribal culture. So I showed you some maps where we looked at the relationship of the border and tribes in relation to that. And I also mentioned that the border region, is 62 miles north. So we want to be able to explore ways that we address transboundary issues as well as issues in all the region so that we can provide fuller access to the benefits of the program. In this slide, I'm showing a couple of the the reports really that were prepared by NAPEC under Border 2012 and Border 2020. Jill, could you comment on the work that you have done? You have done some very extensive work in terms of accomplishments and needs, and I'm just wondering maybe to what extent this will be helpful to review if we need to do something more.
Yeah. So in the past, we have always we've had face-to-face meetings. We had a face-to-face meeting last year with the tribes to discuss some of their issues and concerns. And we always prepared these big reports that went out with each tribe participating and providing their accomplishments on the work they're doing. And some of the feedback that's always come is that, tribes are making accomplishments, but not because border is funding any activities for the tribes. It's been because the tribes themselves are using other programmatic money to build wells or improve water systems, waste systems. All of the efforts that they've reported have typically come with funding from other sources. And that's kind of been an issue of contention with tribes trying to figure out why do we need to list this as accomplishment when we're doing our own funds and, using our own funds and other programs, and it not being the border specifically. Part of that is to show that tribes are working very hard to make improvements along the border, especially if they're located right on the border. And then also just working with tribes to identify and document their needs. In the past, we've used a variety of sources that I have done through research. I've used information from the Indian Health Services system, for just environmental health issues that tribes are facing along the border. We've looked at the sanitary deficiency system of IHS in terms of what are the actual infrastructure needs of tribes along the U.S.-Mexico border in terms of water, wastewater, drinking water. And then we've used other resources like the air districts and looking at air quality issues along the border, and then any other work that universities might also be doing to look at health impacts or environmental impacts that are occurring along the border. Other issues could be security. I know that especially Tohono O'odham, had experienced a lot of wildland fires that they were dealing with and having to respond to because of other issues along the border, such as drugs that might be being transported. So we have really NAPEC's really worked with the tribes closely to offer a rounded view of the needs of the border from a tribal perspective. And a lot of those issues just continue to linger Those that have been identified in the past, as the tribes on the call know, that there still is a huge financial deficit to waste and drinking water systems along the border. A huge need still exists. A huge need still exists for security and other environmental cleanup activities. So really, you know, I think it would probably be very beneficial to, again, come together and identify those needs again, because at this point, you know, tribes don't really have somebody to say, hey, these are the things that are impacting us, whether it's migrant waste or it's drug trafficking or human trafficking, that all of these issues continue to remain, and we need an opportunity to come together and talk about them. And there's still some, and this is why I really appreciated how Emily shared that, you know, this is a geography thing. This is a designation made by geography, not necessarily any other reasons, but that EPA is looking at it as a border-wide issue, and the tribes who are identified as border tribes are just those tribes who happen to be along that 100, you know, within that 62 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border.
Thank you, Jill. So moving on to slide 18, environmental border region needs. We can be flexible in how we identify border work. So it does not have to be transboundary for us to look at it, is what we're saying. For example, let's consider needs such as solid waste, zero waste practices to keep pace with residential and commercial needs, with California overall goals to divert green waste from landfills, for example. Let's look at green business practices in terms of any kind of building. I'm just mentioning casinos here, or green landscaping for water conservation. Let's look at also strengthening emergency preparedness and response planning. We do it as part of our program. We've been focused on the sister city pairs, but is there a need to support emergency preparedness, especially as we experience a changing climate and more wildfires? So these are just some examples of where we can be flexible. As we look at public health in terms of border region needs, most of the public health concerns that are on the US side of the border are actually similar in the Mexican side of the border. So that is to say, these are transboundary concerns. And the arid climate and changing climate conditions also contribute to these issues. For example, disease such as valley fever, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, air pollution from dust, and now from smoke in terms of wildfires contribute to asthma. And now with COVID issues, we have more stressors, and we see needs related to proper and safe use of disinfectants. Are disinfectants compliant in terms of content and labels and so on? So these are examples of ways that we can explore support for the tribes. And then I also want to say that we value traditional ecological knowledge and are willing to explore projects to advance this. For example, building capacity for indigenous farming practices that use composting, that divert organic materials from landfills, increasing access and production to healthy natural foods, reducing food waste, green landscaping as a way to reduce water, protect groundwater and surface water, and harvest water. So these are just a few examples. And then moving on to the next slide, in terms of coordinating with other EPA programs and state agencies and other partners, I want to say that our Mexico border branch at EPA works to implement the border program in partnership with other EPA programs. So we have grants, record grants, air grants, and we have the GAP grants. We want to work with our state partners also to leverage the work that they do. And we want to work with our international partners, such as Semarnat, the federal environmental Mexican agency that is our partner in our border programs, the North American Development Bank, which is our partner in terms of implementing the grants we have and supporting us in our meetings. And we're also a partner for the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. And they have had projects, for example, working on plastic pollution. We work with academics and nonprofits and industry associations. So these are all partnerships, partners and groups that we work with. And also Jill has asked, what are resources available to support tribal engagement in our border program? Could we use the GAP? Jill, do you want to just quickly kind of give us an example of how we could apply this?
Sorry, I'm trying to get my dog to stop barking. So one of the ideas that I said we could potentially do is look at providing a commitment for the border tribes, as long as the Indian Programs Office would allow tribes to potentially utilize GAP and maybe create a commitment in the GAP work plans for tribes to use to help build capacity on learning more and understanding and paying attention to border issues and how they're impacting their reservations. So that was one idea. And then of course, the idea of potentially when we're able to travel or whatever resources that we need, whether it's, you know, purchasing materials or something, that if we could look at the RTOC travel fund or ask for special allocations for that process. Because as it stands now, tribes typically haven't had the financial support to do a lot of work or pay attention to border issues.
Thank you, Jill. So I know the idea of a template came up, and the GAP requirement is that what is the capacity being built? And I think that we could propose that the capacity being built is the knowledge about the border program, how to engage in the border program and inform the border program in terms of needs and ways that projects can be developed. So we can come back to that. So thank you, Jill. So I'd like to transition again just to activities and projects. So on slide 23, I just want to quickly review some of the work that we have done in our border program. We have worked to mitigate cross-border trash. We have done formal reviews and comment of proposed hazardous waste bill in Sonora, Mexico, that was in the Tohono O'odham's member tribes in Mexico. We've advised on zero waste assessments, and we've cleaned up illegal dump. And the photo here shows the work that we did in Baja with San Antonio Negua. And the next slide is just a quick overview of the kinds of activities that we fund under our border program. We funded studies, for example, to install air monitoring stations at ports of entry. We have funded projects to reduce single-use of plastic containers, working with small businesses in a program called Ocean Friendly Restaurants, a binational initiative. And we have done capacity building with two examples here, working as part of emergency response and community health outreach, where we've trained over 10,500 persons on emergency preparedness and response over several years. And we've trained over 250 promotoras or health community workers in over 12 workshops on issues of asthma, lead, vector-borne diseases, healthy homes, integrated pest management. And now in the next slide, I'd like to ask if Lucy could briefly give us an example of one of our public health grants that we have with the University of Arizona. Lucy?
Yeah, thank you, Emily. It is my great pleasure today to share with you very briefly on our Border 2020 project, emergency preparedness through integrated pest management education and the tribal partnerships in Arizona. So in this project, University of Arizona is partnering with the Intertribal Council of Arizona, ITCA, to work with 3 border tribes, Tohono O'odham Nation, Cocopa Tribe, and Pasqual tribe, to identify capacity building or training needs for environmental health priorities identified by each tribe for future workshops, and also to provide need-based community-driven education focusing on reducing environmental risks and public health threats affecting tribal communities using APM and practices. For some of you who are not familiar with APM, APM is a science-based decision-making process that integrates multiple control techniques to manage pests in ways that minimize risks to human health and the environment. So our project team includes many university faculty and extension experts from diverse fields relevant to APM, public health, pests, and pesticide risk reduction. So our key collaborators, as you can see from this slide, include ITCA, Arizona Department of Health Services, Stop Pesting and Housing Program, and Regional Center for Border Health, and also definitely many of our partner tribal community collaborators. Can we go next slide, please? So this is just a summary of our key grant activities. In short, our project has 2 phases. The phase 1 will be general outreach and planning, and the phase 2 will be implementing training workshops. We use radio, social media, and other outreach tools to inform and educate the tribal community and the general public about the risks of public health pests, and such as mosquitoes. Can you go back, please? I'm not finished yet. Mosquitoes and ticks, commensal rodents, cockroaches, and bedbugs, and pesticide exposure, and also vector-borne diseases in the region, such as West Nile virus, dengue, chikungunya, and the Rocky Mountain spotted fevers. So we collaborate with tribal and other community health experts to identify needs and the best approach to inform, educate, and build capacity for tribal community health experts to mitigate risks and emergency preparedness for vector-borne diseases. During COVID-19, we pivoted to virtual meetings and explored the best delivery method. And for phase 2, we deliver follow-up outreach and training workshops, hopefully in person sometime soon, to build capacity among tribal community health experts. Next slide, please. So those are some examples of our key outreach products so far in this project. And we're focusing on major public health concerns, like I mentioned earlier, in this border region. So we created public service announcements, PSAs, radio scripts, and social media postings, such as postings for Facebook and webpage, to provide short and accurate information on public health or vector concerns. So our tribal partners can adapt and modify those materials for their community needs. So in order to better serve our border tribal communities, we developed outreach materials with detailed version in English and also an infographic version in both English and Spanish. And as you can see from this slide, every outreach, like the trifolds we produce, generally it will be 3 versions, and so we can better serve our stakeholders. We also organized virtual workshops for the tribal health experts and made videos available on vectors. Here I listed that's QR code. If you have a smartphone, you can just scan that QR code. It will bring you to a recorded video on how to identify mosquitoes in Arizona. So this can better serve our health experts if they need some kind of knowledge or information on vectors. So during the current COVID-19 pandemic, we're working with ITCA, Arizona Department of Health Services, and also other partner organizations to help tribal communities improve capacities to respond to the current crisis. So for example, our monthly APM newsletters teach users how to disinfect COVID-19 and how to safely use a face covering or personal protective equipment, PPE, during the COVID-19 pandemic. So those newsletters were sent out to our tribal collaborators, hoping to help them to battle against the virus. And all those outreach materials or the lessons we learned from this project will also be shared with other tribes around the Southwest region through our partner organizations. So far this project is still ongoing, and I hope we will have opportunities to share with you more in the future. And please feel free to ask any specific questions regarding this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Next slide. So this brings us to the ideas and response to our questions. The next slide, please. And we'll just take a pause here to brainstorm some ideas. I just want to review quickly that we talked about having a tribal representative as part of our regional groups, a EPA border program liaison, establishing a border tribal work group as part of our talk, improving the relevance of our program task forces, and we shared many project ideas. Please ask questions, use the chat box, or raise your hands to speak. All your ideas are welcome. So Jessica, could you help me with any questions that we have, or anyone else who wants to raise their hand this time?
There's one question in the chat box. Where would these resources come from, and which agencies would be included with requesting support services?
Yes, so we have our border program solicitation. We expect the solicitation in the spring of this year. Of course, after we have the new border program in place, but in the meantime, we're working under our existing program. And we're exploring possible use of GAP. That's been a suggestion made by Jill. And also, you know, our EPA program also works with other EPA programs in terms of grants with states. We can always look through that. But it is a conversation. It is an ongoing conversation. And we hope to be more specific as our program launches. But that's all what I can share for now. Any other questions?
Hi, I would just like to add, if you haven't signed in yet, please go ahead and sign in the group chat, your name and tribe, because we are tracking this session. Thank you. Okay.
Well, while we're waiting for any other questions, I'd like to you know, invite Jill again or Lucy to comment on anything else that we have raised here, but in particular with regard to funding, one of the things that Jill had proposed is to look at creating a possible template in terms of the GAP program, a template that all the tribes could use based on any expressed interest in terms of getting more engaged with our border program. The capacity building effort would be to learn more about the border program, how tribes could be engaged, for example, attend our meetings, help us develop our agendas, looking at possible needs. So I see some other questions here. What has the pandemic brought to bear about the needs at the border, particularly in Native communities and on the South side? And let's see, how might the recent changes in Seminole leadership affect the border program? Wanted to hear the latest. Okay, so let me just say that in terms of what the latest changes in terms of leadership to the border program, I'm sorry, this is a question from Rob Roy. I can't say what kind of changes the change in leadership. The only thing I can say is that there is a commitment, and also Seminole has expressed interest in working and recognizing indigenous communities in Mexico. That's what I know in terms of the current leadership. In terms of what changes have been brought to the border region, particular to Native communities, Lucy, could you briefly comment on that?
I don't really have any specific, you know, information on that, but I do know, you know, in general, even before the pandemic, Native communities has been dealing with the most, you know, concerned public health concerns, such as the dengue, especially dengue on the other side of the border, and also Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It's really common on the south side of border. But, you know, and now we also added in the pandemic, which limits lots of resources, the information exchanging, and also cause more urgent or necessary needs for the Native communities right now, in addition to the common needs for them. And I just hopefully we will be able to help them with the opening of the border, and I just hope we can get information out or guidance to our Native communities. And we used to be able to work with tribes, so they will reach out their community members, before everything happened. But now during, the transportation limitations and border closing, that also caused another, obstacle to what we're doing. But we're definitely, give a try so we can help.
Well, let me ask if anyone from the tribes would like to share how the pandemic has impacted them. I see one comment from Lisa Gover that says that the brown ticks are a real public health issue, and so this raises concern on how the pandemic is impacting. Let's see, Robert, I mentioned earlier that you would touch on the delay in yes. So yes, the border program had been scheduled to be launched by the September 30th date, and unfortunately it was not. And I do not have any new information on a launch date for that. So I'm sorry that I don't have anything more to share. The only thing is that we have shared the last draft. We're not aware of any changes at this time, but as soon as we have more information, we will be in touch with you. Is there anyone else that wants to share any comments with regard to how the pandemic has impacted them? Feel free to unmute if you want to make any comments. Let's see. Have any projects that were proposed by tribes that aren't located immediately on the border been funded in the past several years? Let's see. That's a good question. Camille, I'm not aware of a specific example for that. I would say that there have been efforts in terms of projects like the one Lucy is doing, which would benefit many tribes. And I'm hoping that one of the ways that we could support tribes all around the border is to be able to develop a project that would be a benefit to tribes, whether they're right on the border or away from the border. So, but I do not have a specific example, but hopefully the examples that I have provided are things that we can do even for tribes who are not located directly on the border.
And just to add, we can look into it on our end and get back to you as well, Camille.
Great.
Hey, this is Lucy. I saw Lisa's comments on the brown dog ticks, and that's definitely impacting, due to the pandemic, because we also work with another collaborators, on the effort to do the brown dog tick surveillance on tribal lands. But due to the pandemic, lots of our activities has been limited, so we won't bring any potential, contagious or pandemics, to our community members. So some of our spay or neuter clinics, or the brown dog tick installation, a marble, installations kind of delayed, or some of them even not implemented because of the pandemic. Yeah, thank you. That's very good, Lisa.
Great. Well, so I guess in terms of, let me go to the next slide on next steps. I'd like to I will follow up with the tribes on the launch of Border 2025 once we get new information. We want to await input on the way that the tribes can have tribal representation as part of each of the regional groups. We want to continue the dialogue on forming a border tribal work group as part of the RTOCs. And we want to engage the tribes in terms of identifying the priorities for consideration in the next border program solicitation, which will be in the spring of 2021. And we will summarize and share the input from this session with the tribes. And I've shared my contact information, my email, and my phone number. And I would really welcome all of you to reach out to me with any additional questions, more ideas in terms of how we can better serve the tribal community that is in the border region. And hopefully we have made the point that we want to be more inclusive in terms of how we serve the tribes, no matter where they are located on the border program. Transboundary issues are still important, but the border region is a geography with characteristics that have impacts, and we want to be able to better address those as well. Let's see. Lisa says, I would like to have some discussion on climate change and global warming effects and the transboundary issues raised in terms of environmental health and impacts to lands and landscapes on our water and our air quality. So thank you, Lisa. That is an important point that I think merits more discussion. And hopefully we can certainly add that to an agenda for a future session. Jill, is there anything else that you would like to add before I close? Anyone else also that's in the group that would like to unmute and just provide any remarks? Jill?
So this is Jill. I would just say, you know, if tribes want to, if there are other kinds of conversations that you want to have regarding the border, besides just, you know, the issues that we've discussed in the past, I think Lisa's suggestion about climate change and other issues that are impacting border tribes is a good conversation to have. You know, shoot me an email. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about, you know, having a border only discussion meeting among the tribes, because maybe that's what we need to do, is to have time for the tribes to think about it, and then, you know, we can discuss it again. Are there tribes who'd be interested in doing that? Just let me know.
Yes. So I like the suggestion, Lisa, of looking into that further. And thank you all for the comments in the chat box. Again, you know, if there's anything else you want to share in the chat box, love to see that. And if you want to unmute and just say hello, that would be great too. Lucy, any parting comments for you?
Thank you. I just noticed the Lisa's climate change, and I think that's a really good point to, you know, for the groups to discuss more, because actually we do have the climate change does affect the vectors who, you know, transmits the you know, pathogens such as brown dog ticks, and we also got some new geographical distributions of new vectors in the new location. So I think that's definitely, you know, I would highly suggest, you know, to have a discussion on that one. And that's a really good suggestion. Again, thank you, Lisa. It was great. And thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And Jessica, is there something that you would like to share at this time? Thank you so much for your help in advancing the slides.
Of course. I just wanted to thank everybody for attending and let everyone know we are really open to exploring new ideas. And this is a great space to kind of share and continue the conversation. Feel free to mull over the ideas that Emily, Lucy, and Jill shared today and think about how we can work together and reach out via phone, via email. This is not an end of the discussion, so feel free if you didn't have an immediate answer right now to share later. Thanks.
Yes. I see the comment in terms of EJ program funding and how those might be used in the border program. Absolutely, we can definitely look into that. So, well, we'll stay here a few more moments in case there's somebody who wants to just add anything else, say hello. I'm very grateful for this time. And I want to thank Jill very much for assisting me. She has many years of experience. And Lucy, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And we hope to get some more ideas in terms of the public health impacts and climate change and so on. And Jessica, thank you as always so much for all the work that you do in terms of improving our connection with people and our communications work and the communications that you do. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who has participated in this session. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to having a continued conversation about this and to coming together at some point in the future. But I want to wish you well as we continue to experience this pandemic. I know it's been impacted many people, their families. And so I want to wish you well as we close this session. Continued health for you all and your families. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Lorena.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Vanessa, for your help.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.